Good morning. It's been a while since I've done a video, so I apologize to those of you who have been waiting. In this segment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph a cosine function from beginning to end and hopefully get in all the pieces and parts: amplitude, period, phase shift, vertical shift, all of those things. So for those of you who were struggling with bits and pieces on the way through, hopefully this video will answer your question and give you a little bit more experience as well. So let's go to work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by graphing the cosine function. If I graph just a standard cosine function, let's just look at it in one period. Then what I've got here is the standard key points: pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Looks like I didn't make my x-axis long enough. Amplitudes at 1 and -1. Cosine moves from the maximum to the midline, to the minimum, to the midline, and back to the maximum in this shape. And we're going to use this information to alter it a little bit. Our goal is going to be to get to this function right here. Y equals -5 times the cosine of 6x minus pi. And then I'm going to add a plus 3 out here. Now, for those of you who are looking at your review sheet for the 6-4-6-5 test, this is almost the first one on the last page, except that that one doesn't have a vertical shift. So we're gonna add that just for the purposes of this video. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to talk about how it would change if I looked at just this piece right here. Well, this is the amplitude, so that part's pretty easy. Just the 5 would change this from 1 and -1 to 5 and -5. And the fact that it's a -5 would mean that instead of going from the top down to the bottom and returning, it would actually do the opposite thing. Okay, so let's just get that in our minds first. It would do this kind of thing instead. Now, I'm not going to draw them all in this graph. That would get really confusing really fast. So instead, I'm going to move down a little bit, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So let's take y equals -5 cosine. Now let's talk about what the 6x minus pi is for. Okay, when we're graphing this, what we have to recognize is that this gives us information about the period, and this gives us information about the phase shift. So we got period, phase shift. Okay, so the period, I know, comes from 2 pi over b, where 6 is b. So 2 pi over 6, or just pi over 3. And the phase shift comes from -c over b. Since our c in this case is already negative, we're going to change that back to a positive, pi over 6. And I know that you guys think that the chart is just awful and arduous, but we're going to do it anyway because it really does help you to understand what's going on, and it helps you to label without getting quite so confused. So I'm going to go ahead and set the chart up here. And we need 1, 2, 3, 4 vertical lines. Okay, so the period is going to go here. The phase shift goes here. And we're going to cut our period into 4 equal pieces: 0, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1. I'm going to fill it in a different color so that you can see what's going on here. We're going to take the period and split it into those 4 equal parts. So we're going to take this first row and we're going to multiply it by the period. So if we take pi over 3 times 0, we get 0. Pi over 3 times 1/4 is pi over 12. Now those of you who are having difficulty with the fractions, I want you to pause the video, get your graphing calculator out, and I want you to try these in the graphing calculator. Of course, we don't put pi in the calculator unless we absolutely have to, because it just makes a great big hairy mess. But I want you to try putting 1/3 times 1/4 in the calculator and math fracking it and see if you don't get 1/12. Okay? Same thing with 1/2 times pi over 3 should be pi over 6. 3/4 times pi over 3 will be pi over 4. And 1 times pi over 3 will be pi over 3. So pause the video, double check my numbers. I want you to be able to do this on your own. If you can't do this on your own, it's just going to make this a whole lot harder. So let's go and deal with the phase shift now. The phase shift, and I'm going to get my calculator out here because I'm going to break it too. You can't see that, but I just threw it on the floor. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the phase shift, which is this guy here, to each of the pieces in the second row there. Okay? All right. So 0 plus pi over 6 is pi over 6. 1/12 plus 1/6 is going to give me 1/4, or pi over 4. 1/6 plus 1/6 is 2/6, or pi over 3. 1/4 plus 1/6 is going to give me 5/12. Again, you can do these in the calculator. 5 pi over 12. Okay, and 1/3 and 1/6 is going to give me 1/2. Okay, so here is my x-axis. These are the numbers that I'm going to plot on the x-axis. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up a coordinate plane here. And put on it this third row. This is the row that I'm going to put on the x-axis. So I've got pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3, 5 pi over 12, and pi over 2. Now notice that the y-axis is no longer my first key point. My first key point is this guy here. So this is where the new starting place is going to be. Okay, I already determined that I should be at 5 and -5 for my amplitudes, and that I should start at the bottom. So my first point, just like up here, my first point was 0, -5. Now my first point is going to be at pi over 6, -5, because this is the first key point. I go up to the midline, to the maximum, to the midline, to the minimum. And so my graph looks like this. Okay, now there was one more piece that I wanted to add to this, and that was the phase shift up here. So let's take this guy all the way down here and let's look and see what the phase shift would do. So I'm going to leave this guy on the screen, and I'm going to rewrite it as, and let's just change colors again because we've got this whole palette to choose from over here. We're going to say y equals -5 cosine 6 pi, not 6 pi, 6x, minus pi, and we had a +3 out there. Now again, if you're looking at your review sheet, the +3 part is not on there. I'm really only doing that for the purposes of this video. What this +3 does is it gives us the vertical shift. If we know on the y-axis that our amplitude told us to use 5, 0, and -5, and of course we don't label the 0 because it's just the x-axis, then our vertical shift of 3 is going to have us move up 3 from each of those y-axis points. Sorry, not 8, -2. So our y-axis, when we're graphing this thing, oh well, that's a little high, isn't it? Our y-axis here is going to look like this. We've got -2, 3, and 8. We've got the same key points along here, pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3, 5 pi over 12, and pi over 2. We've got these same key points along here, only now we have a midline across this way. So the y-axis, excuse me, the x-axis is no longer the middle. So just like we put this little dashed line through here on the previous part, we can put this dashed line through here. And so our dashed lines are behaving like the x and y-axis did in our original graph up here. So let's come back down here and notice that the first key point should be at the minimum at the first key point, just like it is up here in the orange graph. So we're going to say that pi over 6 -2 is our first point of interest. Pi over 4, 3, pi over 3, 8, 5 pi over 2, 3, and pi over 2, -2 are going to be the key points on this cosine graph. And this guy right here is the entire graph. Y equals -5 times the cosine of 6x minus pi plus 3. And that gives you all of the information. So if you need to, rewind, fast forward, do whatever you need to do, and study again those specific parts of the of finding the phase shift, the period, those kinds of things, using the vertical shift, recognizing the fact that it is negative, so it's going to move in the opposite direction over the x-axis. And feel free to email, as always, if you have any questions. Good luck!